Hey Night Shift, welcome back. I'm Dr. Insomnia. Tonight's episode steps into Skinwalker lore. In Navajo Diné tradition, a Skinwalker, Yi Nadlushi, isn't a monster, but a witch who chooses harmful medicine, breaking community taboos to gain power. Stories describe uncanny speed, moving by night, and taking on the shapes of animals like coyote, wolf, or owl. Many Diné avoid speaking about them at all, so we'll keep this high level and respectful. The internet often blends this belief with broader mimic/shapeshifter tales. Why are they so terrifying? Because the threat isn't claws, it's recognition. Voices copied perfectly, footsteps that circle without tracks, a silhouette that looks almost right until it moves wrong. The fear lives in the gap between the familiar and the not quite, between someone you trust calling your name and something that only sounds like them. With all the explained, let's get into the video. We know you'll enjoy this one. This experience I'm going to describe has taken a while for me to get together and actually write down. I've experienced a few paranormal things, but this is the craziest one of all of them. It takes place in Yosemite National Park in August of 2017 with my two best friends, Zach and Andrew. Zach had worked that summer as a parking agent at Glacier Point and was pretty familiar with the area. His employee housing he was given was a house in Wawona with two other guys. Andrew and I were visiting for the week and had each been to Yosemite before. One of the nights there, we decided to watch the sunset over Chilnalna Falls. It was a great hike that Zach had done before. The trail was about 4 miles to the top, with about a 2,000-foot elevation gain. We brought food and decided to hike up and take a swim and eat at the pools on top of the falls. We set out a couple hours before sunset. As we approached the top portion, we were about a half mile to the top of the falls where a guy, about our age, early 20s, ran up to us from bushes, frantically asking for help. His friend had fallen 50 feet off a cliff and had a shattered femur. Zach was used to this. After working in the park all summer, he had seen many injuries and was used to it. The man didn't have cell reception, but I did, so I called 911 and reported the accident, requesting search and rescue. After a few minutes, we decided we wanted to continue the hike after search and rescue assured us they would be there soon with a helicopter. We told the guy help was on its way, and we continued the next half mile up to the top of the falls. When we got up there, it was a picture-perfect scene. A beautiful sunset as we swam and ate. We then got an amazing show as we saw the helicopter land to pick up the injured guy we just encountered, right below us. I'm a private pilot and Air Force aviator, so I loved every second of watching the helicopter land on the mountainside. After the sunset, we began the hike down and passed the spot with the injured guy, and search and rescue was taking care of him. We had a brief encounter with them. They thanked us for calling it in. It was now dark out and we continued the hike down. There wasn't much moonlight. It was pretty dark, so we used our phones as flashlights to see the trail. This is where the story gets interesting. The top of the hike was switchbacks with a steep incline on the right and a steep decline on the left with shrubs and trees. It was definitely too steep to hike down, hence the switchbacks. About 1 mile into the hike down, Zach was in front with a light. I was second, also shining my light, and Andrew was in back. Zach was shining his light ahead and saw something sticking out from behind a tree that was about 15 feet ahead, just off to the right of the path, and instinctively shined the light at it. That's when whatever it was exposed itself from the tree and ran across the path, down to the left and down the steep grade. It ran on 2 feet and resembled some sort of humanoid. It was a little shorter than us and very clearly had 2 arms and 2 legs, but it moved in an inhuman way. It kinda resembled a person. It had a head and its limbs, but appeared to be just skin, no clothes on at all. We all 3 saw it and stopped dead in our tracks. We continued shining the light to where it ran, down the left side of the mountain, but didn't see anything after it ran down. We were absolutely terrified, none of us really knowing what to say because we had no idea what we saw. The worst part was that we had another 3-mile hike down and 1.5 miles from the trailhead to Zach's house, all while knowing that this creature could be stalking us and was near. Luckily, we made it to his house terrified and exhausted, but without harm. Whatever it was must have been just as scared of us as we were at it. My question is if anyone else has had a similar experience in that area. I've done some research and my best guess would be a skinwalker, but it didn't try to lure us into the forest with it. We had a subsequent experience a couple years later in Tioga Pass, right outside of the Tioga gate of the park. We were camping in a closed campground in Tioga. On the middle of the night, I woke up to piss, and before exiting the tent, I saw an orb about 5 feet from the tent, floating across while a bright light. I don't think it was a person because Zach, Andrew, and I all saw the orb floating across, and there wasn't anyone around us. Our friend Jackson was also in the tent, and in the morning told us he felt rocks getting thrown at the tent all night, along with hearing footsteps near all night. Does anyone have similar experiences? I'd love to hear them. We all know what we saw, and we know that it was not human. So a little backstory. My friends and I have been hiking and backpacking around the area many times, at least once a year on a good long multi-day backpacking trip, a few times in this same location. And other than car problems and sometimes friends not bringing the right gear, we've never had any issues. This specific trip was a 6-mile in, 6-mile out, 6,000 total elevation shift both ways trip to a lake. We did it in October, so we were preparing for extreme colds, potentially below freezing at night. There were only 3 of us, and we were all geared up for this. I was probably the least geared out of the trio, and I knew I'd be perfectly comfortable. So we began the trek in. Took us until end of day, and we got to the lake no problem. Set up camp and just enjoyed ourselves to the sounds of nature, some MREs, and a couple pints of whiskey. At the end of the night, we all settled into our sleeping quarters. Myself in a small tent, my friend in a hammock right next to me around the fire pit, and our other friends some distance away from us in a tent. Now it's important to note that my friend in the hammock was camped right next to me, maybe 10 feet away, while our other friend was probably 100 feet away or so. I had trouble sleeping, was restless, and even though I was warm, I kept getting shivers frequently and tossing and turning in my sleeping bag, which I just attributed to the cold. I didn't think anything of this at the time, and eventually I began to drift to sleep. The forest around was quiet, with the occasional sound of insects buzzing or a bird taking flight from a tree. That's when I was awoken by the sound of my friend's voice. Clear as day, I was groggy and a little confused as to why he was waking me up, but I clearly heard him say, "My name. Help. Help me." I immediately froze as he sounded really desperate and said, "My name. Help me," again. Then, before I got the chance to speak, I heard the voice again. "My name. Help. I have to pee." And then he laughed in a way that sincerely only my friend does. It was a giggle that I'd known him to have since we had met many years ago. And so I responded, "Haha, fuck off his name. I'm trying to sleep." And I thought that he was just trying to be funny. Thinking back on it, it would be very out of character for him to wake me up to pull some stupid joke like that. But I was half asleep and wrote it off. Although I knew something didn't feel quite right about it, I decided to just ignore him and let him do his business. He persisted. "Help, I need you. Come out here." I just mumbled about going back to sleep, and to just go if he needed to. My memory is a little foggy as to how long we conversed back and forth and what exactly was said, but afterwards I had noticed that he hadn't made any noise to leave, to go pee, or get back in his hammock as I was trying to fall back asleep, which I found odd, but again, brushed off as nothing. Once the voice had been gone for a while, and I assumed he had quietly gone on and gotten back to his hammock, I realized I had to pee badly, and wasn't going to get any sleep until I did. So I got out of my tent and immediately walked over to his hammock to pull the same stunt he had on me, calling his name in a joking manner and waking him up to let him know I was there. But when he woke up, he was immediately thrown off by this. That's when I told him I was just going to pee like you had told me you were a bit ago. Maybe 15 minutes had passed. Not enough time for someone to get back in their multi-layer, cold-weather hammock setup and fall deeply asleep again. Not to mention, he hadn't made a sound since our conversation stopped. He asked me what the hell I was talking about, and I asked him over and over if he was just outside my tent. He swore up and down he had been asleep since he laid down that night, and never once got out of his hammock. That's when I felt the real chills go down my spine. Whatever had been outside my tent, asking help in this high-pitched, mocking voice that my friend would sometimes joke with, was not him. I told him, oh, okay, it was nothing then, and I proceeded to go pee, keeping eyes on my surroundings the whole time. Eventually, I was able to get back in my tent, warm up, and get drowsy enough to sleep, even though the events that had just transpired terrified me to my core. I am well aware of the lore of the areas around northern New Mexico, and I wouldn't be the first of my friends to go missing without a trace, had I opened my tent and followed that voice that night. Somehow I shook it off, and was tired enough to start drifting to sleep after I got cozied up. That's when it actually tried to get me. That half-awake state between sleeping and awake. You know, the place where you suddenly feel like you're falling, but get jolted awake? Except this time, I wasn't falling. Something had grabbed onto my tent and was dragging it at what felt like 50 miles per hour across the forest floor. I felt every bump when the tent was hitting tree stumps and rocks, destroying my tent and trashing me around viciously as I was being pulled at an insane speed through the trees, seemingly in a straight line, though which didn't make sense in hindsight with how dense the trees are there. I yelled out and could feel my vocal cords moving, but very little sound came out. I must have traveled a good several hundred feet like this. That's when I opened my eyes. The only thing that felt different was the tent was no longer moving. During this weird trance state of being dragged in my tent, everything looked identical. I was perfectly aware of my surroundings. It felt nothing like a dream. However, when I finally opened my eyes, I was laying in my tent, seemingly undisturbed and unharmed. I called out to my friend, feeling bad for waking him up, but needing to know that this was reality, as the last place felt so real. He groggily woke up and said something back to me before going back to sleep. His response sounded legitimate to me. I thought, that actually sounds like him, realizing that whatever I had heard earlier was so far from anything he would actually do or say. That thing that called out to me in a high-pitched, whiny voice, mimicking my friends saying, "Help, help me, I need help, I have to pee, come out here." It still weirds me out to this day. After asking him about it the next morning, he just laughed and swore to me that he absolutely did not get up in the middle of the night and say anything to me, much less try to joke with me about getting out of my tent to help him. Whatever that was, specifically targeted me. My friends have been back there since. I opted out of that trip. I've been an avid camper most of my life. More than that, I actually lived in the Wyoming wilderness for almost 2 years as a child in a house on a nature preserve. a place where electricity was only available by generator, and we had to boil water that me and my siblings carried up from the creek. All of this before I was even 10 years old. If there were emergencies, it would be at least an hour before we could get to help, or help could get to us. I've hunted dangerous game, not particularly proud of it, but it happened, and seen some weird shit in the desert. So when I say that I will not venture into the woods of the Cascadia mountain range alone, it's important to know that the wilderness doesn't frighten me easily. I was 23 years old when a friend of mine, we'll call him Darren, all names are altered, invited me to a camping trip. The site was a place a few miles up a logging road, so about an hour-long hike from an already back road as fuck back road. It was just me, Darren, and his good friend Wade. Place was, from the logging road, about 10 minutes down a trail. The moment we got to the site, I was excited. The small lake was beautiful, barely touched by people over the years. It also comforted me somewhat when we got there to see that within the last month at least, somebody else had camped out there, extra wood by the fire pit. We ate a bunch of chili and hot dogs, but around dusk the guys went off into the woods and came back with a sealed bucket they had buried the year before, and we opened it up to get into some MREs they stowed in their cache. It was looking to be one of the better camping trips I'd have had in my adult life. That night was a bit different. For the first time in my life, I felt an uneasiness sleeping in my tent. I couldn't quite place it, chalked it up to not being used to camping without my dad. Darren brought his .38 special for protection from predators, but he was the only one armed. The next day it rained, as it does in the PNW, and we tried to wait it out, but eventually called it quits, packed up, and went home. Fast forward to the next year. Me and Darren get the itch to go camping again, and I wanted to give that site another shot. I spend a great deal of effort convincing a bunch of my friends to tag along. In the end, it wound up being 6 of us and a big white German Shepherd. Me, Darren, Wade, James, Charles, and Rita, James's girlfriend, and Moogie, dog. Knowing about the uneasiness felt the last time, I brought my 12 gauge. James wanted to get some unregulated target practice in, shooting shit they don't allow at official gun ranges, like full cans and gallons jugs. We also brought a quad with us this time so we could haul a bunch of extra water, booze, and other supplies to make our weekend more comfortable. First day, as we're setting up, we hear a loudspeaker playing some music over by the south end of the lake, which was basically right next to the logging road, and this year could be seen from the road unlike the year prior. So, deciding we're big dick Americans, me and James saunter down to meet the source of the noise pollution. Now, I have to commend the coolness of the cop that was just having a fishing trip when 2 large armed men, me with the 12 gauge, James with his .308, emerged from the tree line. We introduced ourselves, mentioned the others but not exactly where we were camping, just that it was nearby. That's when shit started to get creepy. It could have just been cops doing cop shit, but this guy really wanted to know exactly where we were gonna be. Then he was mentioned his favorite spots nearby, and really wanted us to try this other spot 2 more miles down the logging road. At a point, it was almost like he was suggesting that was the only spot where we wouldn't be in trouble. Darren showed up finally, told us that he spoke to the landowners several years ago, and they were fine with us being there. Cop was mad, but we lied and said we'd check out the site he was pushing. None of us trusted the guy when we left, so we decided not to. It was like a horror movie setup. The whole shady cop tells us to go to the spot where his hillbilly friends are gonna kidnap us kind of vibe. So we move on. Pretty early in the day, so we set up our stuff, get a fire going. Float around on our giant 4-person inflatable chair boat thing. Biggest highlight of the day? Charles cut down an entire dead tree with nothing but a small axe, like the midway point between a hatchet and a fireman's axe. An impressive feat of stamina and strength. It was a good day leading into a good night. But right after it got dark, I felt uneasy again. The first thing that worried me was a couple of us heard something big splash into the far side of the lake. We thought maybe it was Moogie, but he was by the fire, his head now perked up and looking in the direction of the splash. Since we were drunk, we thought maybe the floaty thing might be compromised. So we went down with flashlights to pull it out of the water and onto the bank. Then we heard the owl. Charles, Wade, and Darren were already passed out by midnight. Rita was humming along by the fireplace with Moogie, and me and James were out getting some more wood so the fire would last. We heard an owl start up its hooting, a cadence I was familiar with in the area, but something was off about it. I have a gift for mimicking bird noises, so what I noticed immediately is the ending hoot was off. Almost always sounds like the owl is rolling its R's as that final hoot of the sequence goes. James, not nearly as outdoorsy as me, says, "That almost just sounds like a person." We joke, listen to it a couple more times, then I do my own attempt at an owl noise. Silence. For a few minutes. Just as I am thinking that makes sense because of the noise, it starts up again, but not just one owl. Another started up about half a second after the first. The new owl sounding more like an actual owl than the first one that seemed to have started up again. And after the first hoot from real owl, the fake one stopped short. Did that owl just tell the other owl to shut up, LOL? James says to me. I decide to shout, "Better listen to your wife, dude." Immediately after I shout, we both hear a loud crashing, almost identical to the sound of the tree falling that Charles did earlier that day. Moogie starts to go fucking berserk, barking and growling. He had a stink gland issue at this point still, so he was releasing that nastiness as well. He was threatened, and luckily Rita was there to keep him from bolting. Big as he was, if he really wanted to move, she wouldn't be much of an obstacle. I'm about to shit my pants out of fear. I will reiterate for effect, I have hunted mountain lions and bears in my life, and at no point during those hunts was I as shaken and genuinely afraid as this. I was paralyzed for like an entire minute. "Whoever that is, you better fuck off. We have plenty of guns," I shout across the lake. Then silence again, luckily for the rest of the night. I didn't fall asleep until Darren woke up, basically at sunrise. So I missed breakfast and a morning dunk in the lake the others all did before I got up, needing to poo real bad. James had already explained the noises to the others by time we all were ready for our different adventures. Darren, Wade, and Rita just wanted to listen to the radio and chill. Moogie had run off just after lunch, and we decided to go look for him while also investigating the area of the noises last night. Almost immediately, when we get to the other side of the lake, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. Charles also feels creeped out, but he had an axe, I had a shotgun, and James had his rifle and his .45 holstered on his hip. So we pressed onward, looking for probably a couple of hours. I was mainly trying to see if we could spot any trees that had fallen. Then we made it to the eastern bank of the lake. We were camped on the western side. "Holy shit," Charles says, causing me and James to come rushing over. There we saw what looked like a human footprint. Just one, but it was very clearly a footprint in the mud. Even had a little pool of water still in it. My first thought was Bigfoot, so I took off my boot and compared sizes. I am a huge guy with pretty large feet, So it wasn't a surprise that my clodhoppers dwarfed this footprint when I put my own print down next to it. But what was weird was the other print, where the pinky toe would be, looked like another big toe was there instead. We also found several downed trees, but none that looked recent. So we decided to go around the north of the lake and back to the others, doing a full circle. Moogie was fine. As soon as food smells filled the air, he came running back. And we all had a pretty good day again, drinking, feasting, and making fun of each other for being paranoid. We heard some gunshots a little close, and then called out to warn the shooters that there were people and animals nearby. The shooters of us actually went to meet the people, and all of us but Darren and Wade joined the old guy and his wife shooting at whatever we could. Part of me consciously thought, anything that was lurking around sure as fuck isn't now. Boy, was I wrong. A brief mention about Charles. Ever since we were kids, Charles has had vivid night terrors. Most of the time funny, some of the time scary. He'd full-on sleepwalk and have conversations with you while still asleep. We had all gone to bed. I was one of the first due to getting like 4 hours of sleep and being quite rum drunk. "Hey, who's that? Captain, stay in your tent!" Charles, who was sleeping on a tarp by the fire instead of in a tent, started shouting. I shot up, grabbed the shotgun, and turned on my flashlight.
"What's wrong?" I shout, adrenaline filling my entire existence. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Come closer to the fire. No, don't crouch down, motherfucker. Use your words." He keeps shouting, finally stirring awake James and Rita, who were in the tent closest to Charles. "What the fuck?" James calls out. Moogie starts growling and apparently let off the stink gland again in their tent because him and Rita are like, "Ugh, Moog, gross." "There's somebody sneaking up on Captain's tent. Get out here." I start to unzip my tent. "Not you, Captain. Stay in there. He's right next to you." Everybody else to this day denies hearing this, but I swear I heard something whisper "Captain" before hearing a twig crunch right outside my tent. James makes it out of his tent, and seconds later I hear him laughing. It's just the water stump. Charles is just having a night terror. Charles claimed he wasn't dreaming, but when I got out and shined the light on the stump, he agreed that that had to be it. We put one of those big jugs of water on top of a stump. It could easily be mistaken for a white shirt standing in the dark. Satisfied that there wasn't actually anything there, despite my protests, we all went back to bed. Charles stayed in the tent for the rest of the night. I decided to spend the rest of the night on watch. That was one of, if not the most terrifying nights of my life. I heard more activity in those woods than I had ever heard before. Moogie would wake up and borf multiple times as I'd hear twigs snapping off in the trees. Then I heard a really big snap that had to have only been about 10 feet away. I jumped to my feet, whipped over to where the noise was, and shined my light. I've seen enough deer ass in my life to know what I saw running from me. What is not normal of deer, however, is they don't stand the fuck up and run on their back legs. Moogie howled and snarled. I took aim, letting my light drop and fired. I didn't care that it turned to run. I fucking unloaded. Boom after boom after boom until I ran out of all 6 shells I had loaded. Everyone else was freaking the fuck out and rushed out of their tents. I told them what happened, and nobody went back to bed until the morning. Nothing else happened that night. I think Moogie refusing to leave the tent was what allowed the others to take me seriously enough. He was a brave dog, sweet, but if mean dogs fucked with him at the park, he knew how to throw down. The last thing that happened on that last day, Darren and Wade went to go bury the bucket after putting some fresh new supplies in it. They had always known where the cache was buried because there was a different stump that they used as a landmark. That stump was just gone. It was there when we retrieved the cache 2 days prior, but now it was vanished.
No signs of it being uprooted, dragged, or disturbed. It simply was as though it never existed. We all thought we made a mistake until we found the hole for the bucket, still dug and with the little poncho stuffed in it. Well, I'm never coming back here now, so we may as well take this with us, Darren said, and we all left after lunch. That is why I will never even go hiking in the Cascade Wilderness without a firearm and at least 2 other people who know how to use them. Thanks for walking the line with me. Remember, in the net culture, these stories are sacred. Share them with respect, and don't use the name lightly. Out there, the safest answer is no answer. If the dark knows your voice, don't give it more to learn. If you've had a mimic encounter, tell me, carefully, and I may feature it in a future episode. Like, subscribe, and share this video around. It really does help us out. This has been Dr. Insomnia. Sleep well, if you can.